The screams of twisting metal pierced the night as flames licked the sky. Jack Reeves didn't think twice before running toward the wreckage. He had no idea the man he was about to pull from that burning private jet was Elias Montgomery, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the world, or that by sunrise, the trajectory of his struggling single-father life would be altered forever. If you're moved by stories of ordinary heroes and life-changing moments, hit that like button and subscribe to see more incredible journeys of transformation. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. Jack's calloused hands trembled as he set his coffee mug down on the worn kitchen counter. The local news played quietly on his ancient television, providing background noise as he prepared lunches for his 2 children. At 42, his face carried the weathered lines of someone who had endured more than his share of hardship. 8 years as a single father after his wife's death from cancer had taught him resilience, but lately, the weight felt unbearable. "Dad, we're out of peanut butter again," called Emma, his 12-year-old daughter, rummaging through the nearly empty pantry. Her brother Tyler, 9, sat at the table struggling with math homework that should have been completed the night before. "I know, sweetheart. I get paid tomorrow," Jack replied, the familiar knot of financial anxiety tightening in his stomach. The construction company he worked for had cut back his hours, and the medical bills from Tyler's asthma treatments were piling up faster than he could manage. Their modest home sat on the outskirts of Pinewood, a small town nestled against the mountains. Jack had inherited the property from his parents, a blessing, as he could never have afforded a mortgage on his own. The location was remote but peaceful, with the nearest neighbor almost a mile away and a small private airfield about 3 miles down the winding mountain road. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, Jack stepped onto his porch with a beer in hand. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine and the promise of an early winter. Stars blanketed the sky, unobstructed by city lights. This view was one of the few luxuries his simple life afforded him. The distant hum of an aircraft engine caught his attention. Private planes occasionally used the small airfield, though rarely this late. Something about the sound seemed off, the engine sputtered and whined in an unnatural rhythm. Jack's eyes tracked the aircraft's lights as they dipped suddenly, much too low for a normal approach. When the first explosion illuminated the night sky, Jack was already running for his truck. "Mrs. Henley," he shouted into his phone as he drove recklessly down the mountain road. His elderly neighbor had agreed to be his emergency contact for the children. "There's been a plane crash. I'm going to help. Can you get to my place and stay with the kids?" The crash site came into view as he rounded the final bend. A private jet had carved a fiery path through the trees before coming to rest in a clearing about half a mile from the airfield. The fuselage was split open, flames engulfing the tail section while thick black smoke billowed into the night sky. Jack skidded to a stop and ran toward the wreckage, the heat from the flames scorching his face. Years of construction work had taught him to assess structural integrity in an instant. The cockpit was crushed, but part of the passenger cabin remained somewhat intact, though it wouldn't stay that way for long. "Hello? Anyone alive in there?" he shouted, approaching a mangled opening that had once been the main cabin door. A weak groan answered him. Inside, through the smoke and flames, Jack could make out a man pinned beneath what looked like a collapsed section of the cabin wall. Blood streaked the man's face, and his expensive suit was torn and soaked with what Jack hoped was just spilled liquor from the shattered bar cart nearby. "Hold on. I'm coming in," Jack called, pulling his shirt over his nose and mouth before climbing into the wreckage. The heat was unbearable, and Jack could hear the ominous creaking of metal as the remains of the aircraft shifted. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before the whole thing would be engulfed. "My leg," the man gasped as Jack reached him. "I can't move." Jack assessed the situation quickly. The wall section wasn't as heavy as it appeared, but the man's leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "This is going to hurt," Jack warned, before bracing himself and lifting the debris. The man screamed but managed to drag himself partially free. Jack dropped the wall section and hoisted the stranger over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. My briefcase, the man mumbled, pointing weakly toward a leather case somehow still intact near what remained of a luxury seat. You've got to be kidding me, Jack muttered, but he grabbed the case anyway before staggering back toward the opening. They cleared the wreckage just as a secondary explosion rocked the night, the force of it throwing them forward onto the ground. Jack covered the injured man with his body as debris rained down around them. When Jack finally rolled off him, the man was unconscious but breathing. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone else must have reported the crash. Jack checked the stranger for additional injuries, finding a nasty gash on his head and what was definitely a broken leg, but nothing immediately life-threatening. It wasn't until the paramedics arrived and recognized the victim that Jack realized who he had rescued. "That's Elias Montgomery," one of them whispered in awe. The Elias Montgomery. Jack had heard the name before, who hadn't? Montgomery Technologies was a global empire, and its founder and CEO was one of the richest men in the world. The kind of man whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose words could shift stock markets, whose wealth was measured in billions. "Sir, you need medical attention too," a paramedic insisted, noticing the burns on Jack's arms and the cut on his forehead he hadn't even felt in the adrenaline rush. "My kids are home alone," Jack replied, already backing toward his truck. "Their sitter should be there by now, but I need to get back." "At least take my card," the paramedic said, pressing it into Jack's hand. "The police will want your statement, and you really should get those burns looked at." Jack nodded absently, watching as they loaded Montgomery into the ambulance. The briefcase sat forgotten on the ground. Jack picked it up, intending to give it to one of the emergency responders, but in the chaos of multiple agencies arriving at the scene, somehow he ended up driving home with it still in his truck. By the time he returned home, it was past midnight. Mrs. Henley had fallen asleep on the couch, and the kids were thankfully still in bed. Jack thanked her, saw her safely to her car, then took a shower to wash away the soot and blood. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain from his burns and cuts began to register. He collapsed into bed without even looking at the briefcase he'd set on his kitchen table. Morning arrived with the insistent ringing of his doorbell. Jack groaned, every muscle in his body protesting as he dragged himself out of bed. The digital clock read 7:15 a.m., he'd overslept, and the kids would be late for school. The doorbell rang again, more urgently this time. "Coming," Jack called, pulling on a t-shirt as he limped to the door. Two men in dark suits stood on his porch. Behind them, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows idled in his driveway. "Mr. Reeves," the taller of the two asked. "I'm David Chen, head of security for Elias Montgomery. We need to speak with you immediately." Jack's stomach dropped. The briefcase. In the chaos, he'd forgotten to turn it over to the authorities. "Look, I was going to return the briefcase today," Jack began, but Chen raised a hand to stop him. "Mr. Montgomery is awake and asking for you," Chen said. "He's at Pinewood Memorial Hospital. He's requested that we bring you to him immediately." Before Jack could respond, Emma appeared behind him, her school backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad? Who are these people? And why aren't you dressed for work?" Tyler joined her, his eyes widening at the sight of the imposing men and the luxury vehicle. "Cool car." Jack turned to his children, suddenly aware of how this must look. "Change of plans today, guys. I need to go see someone important. Mrs. Henley will take you to school." "But Dad," Emma began to protest. "No arguments, Em. This is important." Jack turned back to Chen. "Give me 15 minutes to get my kids situated." Chen nodded. "Of course. We'll wait." 20 minutes later, after arranging for Mrs. Henley to pick up the children from school as well, Jack found himself in the back of the SUV, the briefcase on his lap, heading toward the hospital. "Mr. Montgomery was very insistent on seeing you," Chen explained as they drove. "He remembers everything you did last night." Jack shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. Chen's expression suggested otherwise. The pilot and co-pilot didn't survive the crash. Without your intervention, Mr. Montgomery would have died as well. The hospital had cleared an entire floor for Montgomery. 2 more security personnel stood outside his private room. Jack felt distinctly out of place in his worn jeans and faded t-shirt as he was ushered inside. Elias Montgomery looked remarkably composed for a man who had nearly died the night before. His leg was elevated and in a cast, and a bandage covered part of his forehead, but he was sitting up in bed, multiple phones and a tablet arranged around him. He looked younger than Jack had expected, perhaps early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the lean physique of someone who made time for exercise despite a demanding schedule. "Jack Reeves," Montgomery said, his voice strong and clear as he set aside a phone. "The man who saved my life." Jack stepped forward awkwardly, holding out the briefcase. Grab this like you asked." "Sorry, I didn't turn it over to the authorities last night." Montgomery waved dismissively at the briefcase. "That? It contains nothing but some reading material and a half-eaten sandwich. I was delirious when I asked for it." His piercing blue eyes studied Jack intently. "You ran into a burning aircraft to save a complete stranger. Why?" The question caught Jack off guard. I don't know. I just did what needed doing." "You have burns on your arms and a cut on your forehead that should have stitches," Montgomery observed. "Yet you refused medical treatment to return to your children." Jack shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "They needed me. Single father, I'm told. 2 children." Montgomery picked up a tablet and glanced at it. "Construction worker at Pinewood Building Company. Hours recently reduced. Medical debt from your son's asthma treatments. Mortgage-free but struggling to make ends meet." Jack stiffened. "You've been investigating me?" "I make it a point to know everything about people who interest me," Montgomery replied unapologetically. "And you, Mr. Reeves, interest me greatly. Look, I didn't help you for a reward." "Of course you didn't. That's precisely why you deserve one." Montgomery set the tablet down. "I'd like to offer you a job, Mr. Reeves." Jack blinked. "A job? Doing what?" "Personal security consultant. My current head of security failed to identify serious mechanical issues with my aircraft despite multiple warnings from the maintenance crew. I need someone with better judgment." "I don't know anything about aircraft maintenance or security," Jack protested. "You know about integrity and quick thinking under pressure. The rest can be learned." Montgomery named a salary figure that made Jack's knees weak. "Plus comprehensive benefits, of course. Your son's medical needs would be fully covered." Jack's mind reeled. The amount Montgomery had casually mentioned was more than 5 times his current annual income. "Why would you offer me this?" Jack asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Montgomery replied. "You risked your life for a stranger. You prioritize your children above all else. You live modestly despite financial hardship." He leaned forward slightly. "In my world, Mr. Reeves, those qualities are exceedingly rare." Jack ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. "I need to think about this. Talk to my kids." "Of course." Montgomery handed him a business card. "My private number. Call me when you've decided. But don't take too long, I'm being discharged tomorrow and flying back to New York." As Jack was escorted out of the hospital room, his mind was a whirlwind of possibilities and doubts. The offer seemed too good to be true, and in Jack's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. When he arrived home, he found a delivery van in his driveway. The driver was unloading groceries, premium brands Jack could never afford. "Mr. Reeves," the delivery man called. "Special delivery ordered by Mr. Montgomery's office." Where would you like these? Before Jack could respond, Emma came running out of the house. Dad! There's a lady inside who says she's from some foundation. She says they want to pay for my college. The next few hours passed in a blur. The Montgomery Education Foundation representative explained that both Emma and Tyler had been awarded full scholarships through college, including private school immediately if Jack desired. Another representative arrived to discuss medical coverage for Tyler through the Montgomery Health Initiative. By evening, Jack's modest home was filled with high-quality groceries, and his phone contained the contact information for half a dozen Montgomery employees who had been assigned to assist his family. As he sat on the porch that night, the same spot where he'd witnessed the crash less than 24 hours earlier, Jack tried to make sense of how completely his life had changed. The financial burdens that had been crushing him were suddenly lifted. His children's futures, which had kept him awake with worry on countless nights, were now secure. Yet something didn't sit right. Jack had never wanted charity. His pride had always pushed him to provide for his family through his own efforts, even when it meant working double shifts and going without. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Reeves, it's Elias Montgomery. I thought you might be having doubts by now." Jack was startled by the accuracy of the observation. "How did you know?" "Because I would, in your position." Montgomery's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "You're wondering if this is charity. It's not. Everything I've offered comes with strings attached." "What strings?" Jack asked warily. "I expect loyalty. Hard work. Honesty even when it's uncomfortable. In return, I provide security for you and your family." There was a pause. "I don't make these offers lightly, Mr. Reeves. I've built my company by recognizing potential in people that others overlook." Jack watched as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Why me, really? There must be thousands of qualified security professionals you could hire." "Because when that plane was burning, you didn't hesitate," Montgomery replied simply. "Do you know how rare that quality is? Most people freeze. They calculate risks. They wait for someone else to act. You didn't." The line went quiet for a moment before Montgomery continued, his voice softer now. 8 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer too. The difference is, I had wealth to cushion the blow. You've been carrying your grief and your responsibilities without a safety net. I admire that strength, but I also recognize how exhausting it must be." Jack was stunned into silence by the personal revelation. "The job offer is genuine," Montgomery continued. "You would earn every penny. But I won't pretend there isn't an element of, let's call it karmic balancing, in my decision. Sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time. I choose to pay attention when that happens." After they hung up, Jack called Emma and Tyler onto the porch. Under the vast canopy of stars, he explained the opportunity they'd been offered, a new life in New York, new schools, new possibilities. "But what about our house?" Tyler asked, his young face serious in the porch light. "And Mom's garden?" Jack felt his heart constrict. The garden had been Lisa's pride and joy. After her death, he'd maintained it as best he could, a living memorial to her. "We wouldn't sell the house," Jack decided aloud. "We'd keep it. Come back for holidays and summers." Emma, always the practical one, had been quiet. "You'd be working for the man you saved?" Jack nodded. "It's a big change. I wanted to know how you both feel about it." Emma looked out at the familiar landscape they'd always called home. "I think Mom would want us to go," she said finally. "She always said we should grab onto good things when they come our way." The next morning, Jack called Montgomery and accepted the position. 2 weeks later, after a whirlwind of preparations, the Reeves family moved into a comfortable apartment in Manhattan, provided as part of Jack's compensation package. Jack's new role was challenging but fulfilling. Montgomery hadn't exaggerated about expecting loyalty and honesty. Jack found himself responsible for evaluating security protocols across